Hello students. In the previous lecture, we started looking at the pipelined implementation of instruction execution. And we also understood that if we were able to achieve the ideal speed up, that would improve the performance equal to the number of pipeline stages, right? So we also understood that to achieve such a thing, we have uh, assumed quite a few things and we started addressing all those assumptions one by one. So a quick recap of all those things. So our assumptions were, the very first one is we wanted to know, or we ignored that the unfinished instructions would need to be kept somewhere. So accordingly we have introduced the pipeline buffers, or interstage buffers they're called. And the side effect of that is a possible increase in the clock cycle. It means that the frequency of operation would reduce a bit. The second assumption was splitting the execution into 5 equal tasks, equal in the sense that they all will take same amount of time. But that can be the case, but and it cannot be the case. If all the stages are taking same time, it's called a balanced pipeline. If they are not taking same time, it's called an unbalanced pipeline. So unbalanced pipeline will not be able to give us the performance of an ideal pipeline, uh, which is equal to the number of stages. Okay. The third assumption was assuming that there are sufficient hardware modules for each of the stages to work on their own. But that might not be the case, and such scenarios are called structural hazards. Hazard is a event which will obstruct or limit the smooth functioning of the pipeline. Structural hazards are caused because of limitations of the existing hardware, or rather the availability of the hardware. So accordingly we looked at the operation of the register file and said that if we are able to get it working twice as fast as other stages, then one structural hazard can be eliminated. The other possible case was where we were trying to access the same memory module both during the memory access stage and during the fetch stage. So accordingly we have split them into instruction memory and data memory. With that we were able to avoid one more possible structural hazard. Now moving on, the fourth assumption we made was executing one instruction is completely independent of another instruction. Like I mentioned in the previous lecture, this will not be a big issue in car manufacturing, because if we are building the 10th car, how is it related to the ninth car and 11th car, right? So all of them can be made without much interaction among the different stages of the car building, right? No, but that's not the case with the instruction execution. Accordingly, we have two possible hazard scenarios, right? One is because of data dependence among the instructions. It can lead to data hazards. The other is control dependence among the instructions, which can lead to control hazards. The fifth assumption was ignoring the supervision complexity. Here, in terms of the pipeline, it is the additional logic that we need to include in the control circuitry to generate signals for multiple instructions in each cycle, right? Because each instruction will be in its own uh, stage. Also, we need to be able to track the progress of each instruction. So the uh, complexity of the control circuitry can potentially be uh, n times the unpipelined version, if n is the number of stages, right? Because we are handling n instructions at a time. Now before we go and look at the overall pipeline, let's try to answer the fourth assumption, right? Executing one instruction is completely independent of another. Obviously that assumption is wrong. We have data dependence among the instructions, and We are going to look at possible approaches to handle this data dependence both at the hardware and software, and we are also going to answer the question on which one would be better, either the hardware or the software, or maybe we can get them both working together to get better performance. The other dependence is control dependence, and we are going to see how we can handle the unconditional branches or gems, JL and JLR, in RISC-V. Also, we are going to understand how we can handle the conditional branches, the branch if equal, branch if not equal, greater than, less than, etc. Right? And in the process, we are going to look at some of the hardware optimizations, namely the branch delay slot and branch prediction. And at the software, we are also going to answer if we can do something about it, right? Let's start with the data hazards. To understand what data hazard means, we need to understand what data dependence means. Let's see all the possible scenarios where the data dependence among the instructions can exist. The very first example is where we have two instructions, I1 and I2 here, and both are taking the value of x1. X1 is the source register for both of them. This is not a scenario which will result in hazard because both of them can read from x1, right? This is called read after read dependence. This will not lead to a data hazard. The other scenario is here. In example 2, we have 5 instructions. Instruction 1 is producing the value of x2, and that is being consumed by I2, I3, I4, and I5, right? Each of the remaining 4 instructions is consuming the value produced by I1. Accordingly, I1 is called producer, I2 is called consumer. Another example of producer-consumer relationship is between I3 and I4. I3 is producing the value of X13, which is being consumed by I4, right? Such relationships of producer-consumer are called read after write dependence. And read after write, RAW in short, can lead to data hazards. A quick recap: whenever there is a hazard, there is a potential that a bubble can get introduced into the pipeline, right? And bubble will not contribute to the performance. Another example of producer consumer relationship is here, where we have a load instruction which is producing the value of x3, and this value is being consumed by the immediately following instruction, which is subtract, right? So x3 is the link between these two. I1 is the producer and I2 is the consumer. Another example, here there is a RAW dependence between I1 and I2. I1 is producing x3 and I2 is consuming x3. Uh, the value loaded in x3 is being stored in the very next instruction. All these three will come under RAW, where one instruction is producing the value and other instruction is consuming it. Few other data dependent scenarios. Here we have two instructions, I1 and I2. Here I1 is using the value of x1 and I2 is producing the value of x1. In normal scenario, right, we would execute I1 first and then we would execute I2. So this, even though x1 is being used by both of them, this will not lead to any data hazard. So such dependence is called write after read or WAR hazard. Another data dependent scenario is where both the instructions are writing to the same register. Here, both I1 and I2 are writing to the register X2, right? Now, by the end of execution of X2, what we expect is the value in X2 will be actually the value written by ANDing x5 and x10, right? But is there a case where x2 is the value of x1 minus x3? Under all normal circumstances, we will not encounter that issue. But there is a dependence. This is called right after right dependence. So if we categorize all these dependency scenarios, the first one, read after read, is not a issue at all, right? The second one, read after write, is called true data dependence, because as we execute one instruction after another in that sequence, even then we will face the issue, because one is producing and some instruction following it is consuming it. Both write after read and write after write are called false data dependencies. Also, write after write is called output dependence, and write after read is called anti-dependence. Both these, anti-dependence and output dependence, will not be discussed in this course, but there are some potential scenarios where we encounter these dependencies also. That I'll just give you the name where we see this. It will come into the picture whenever there is out of order processing, where we are trying to execute I2 before I1. So in this course, we are not going to look at it. We are going to execute instructions one after another. Okay. Maybe at the later part of this module, I'm going to touch a little upon the out of order processing. But for now, for us, the data hazards would mean read after write dependencies. Let's look at them a little more closely. Why would there be data dependence? It's basically the program property. That's the way we typically write the programs. When we are trying to compute a value, right, we intend to use it in later part of the program. Otherwise, why would there be any need for us to compute that value, right? So the place where we are computing that value will be the source, right, the producer, and wherever we are using that value will be the consumer. So the producer consumer relationship is by default there in all the programs. It's not specifically to assembly or machine code. It's the typical coding style, right? We can't avoid that. What data dependence among the instructions conveys is that there is a possibility of hazard at the pipeline. Means when we are trying to execute these instructions with some data dependence, it can possibly lead to some bubbles in the pipeline. It also tells us that the results of these instructions should be strictly computed in that order, right? If let's say I2 is dependent on the result of I1, it means that we have to execute I2 only after executing I1. That order is being established by the data dependency between I1 and I2. The third point that data dependence conveys is a possible upper bound on the amount of parallelism that we can exploit at the hardware. Parallelism in the sense, let's say we have 5 instructions, but every 2 instructions are in some sort of producer consumer relationship. Now the question is, can we execute all of them at the pipeline one of immediately after another? Possibly not, because we have to wait for the result of the previous instruction. So even though we have a pipeline of, let's say, 5 stages, all these instructions, the 5 instructions, cannot be executed in consecutive cycles. We have to wait. So some bubbles will get introduced. Okay. Now, like I mentioned, there are primarily 2 approaches to overcome this dependence. One is maintaining the dependence, but avoiding the hazard. So dependence among the instructions is still respected, because that's the program property. We cannot violate it. If we violate it, then the output of the program we are trying to execute will be wrong, right? So we have to respect the dependence between the instructions, but is there any possibility to execute them without introducing bubbles? Yes, there are a couple of approaches. We are going to look at them. The other approach is eliminating the dependence itself by changing the code. It has approaches both at the software. It means that maybe the compiler, during the compilation, it will try to analyze the dependence and try to rearrange the instructions so that even though the dependence is there, it might not result in a hazard. Right? This can be possible compiler optimization. At the hardware, we can possibly reorder the instructions. Right? Uh, Again, we are going to discuss this aspect as part of the advanced architecture course, not here. But I'll just mention it at the end of the data hazards also again. Okay. So the data dependence, if we try to analyze it, can be uh, between the instructions either through registers. That's what we have seen earlier. Both of them are using the same register. One is producing the value, another is consuming the value, right? Or it can be through memory locations also. Let's try to understand that. So detecting the data flow or data dependence through between the instructions through registers is quite straightforward. That's what we have been doing till now, right? But we need to take some additional care when there is a branch. Let's say there are instructions I1, I2, and I3. I1 is producing some value, I3 is using that value, but I2 is a branch instruction. Now, how do we deal with such cases? It will come into the realm of the control dependence. I'm going to touch upon this point in the very next lecture. Now, if there are no control instructions between I1 and I2, for example, so then it's a straightforward thing to understand that yes, there is a dependence, right? Now, when it comes to detecting dependency between the instructions, which are, let's say, going and trying to access the same memory location, that is very difficult. Why is that? Uh, because the address, though it's same, can look different in different instructions. A quick example here. Let's say we have a load instruction x20, 100, x5, and the immediately following instruction is SD store instruction x13, 33, x2. Now, just by looking at these instructions, we can say that okay, there are the registers are not common. Here we are using x20, x5 and x13, x2. So there is no data dependence. Can we claim that? Possibly not. Why? What if the value of x5 is 0 and x2 is 77? What's happening there? Let's try to understand. We are trying to load some value from memory, which is at location 100 plus 0, basically 100. Whatever the value is there, we are trying to load it into x20. Okay. At the same, in the very next instruction, again, we are trying to access the same location 33 plus 77, 100, and we are trying to store some value in it. So both these instructions are linked because they are trying to access the same memory location. But it's not so obvious like the dependency through registers. So we need to be extremely careful whenever we are dealing with such instructions, right, which are trying to access the memory. Another level of uh, complexity is so let's imagine that both these instructions are part of some loop. So for the very first time, x5 is 0. Let's say this iterator I, and there is another iterator j, let's say x2, right? For the first time, x5 is 0, x2 is 0. So there is no data dependency between load and store. But what happens if x5 is 0 and x2 is the inner loop, which is looping around 100 times? Whenever x2 is 77, right? There is a dependency between these two. So all this we can't foresee beforehand. So That's the reason I'm saying that we need to be extremely careful to execute these instructions in a pipeline fashion. We are going to look at these more from a software point of view. But let's start with addressing the data dependency using the registers. Let's start with the simple example. Here we have 5 instructions. I1 is producing the value of x2, which is being consumed by I2, I3, I4, and I5. So all of them are consumers. The methods to handle data hazards are at the hardware. We have something called stalling the pipeline. It's obvious from the name. Stalling the pipeline means we are not going to make progress with the pipeline. We are going to sit there and say, until this dependency is resolved, I'm not going to move forward. We are going to understand it a little more. The other approach is data or operand forwarding. It's very intuitive approach that effectively handles almost all the data hazards. At the software, again, we look up to the compiler to help us to reorder the code and place some dummy instructions if possible. We call that no op in short, right? So that there is enough space between two dependent instructions that will not be reflecting in the pipeline. But if you look at the overall performance, it might still be bad because no ops effectively don't help us in executing the program faster. The other method is to shuffle the instructions or reorder the instructions and try to look for some safe instruction and place it in between the two dependent instructions. But care needs to be taken in the sense that the data flow among the instructions and even the control flow among the instructions should not get affected. So I'm going to touch upon this later. We'll start looking at the hardware optimizations first. Okay, the very first one is stalling. Let's consider the previous example. We have I1. We would fetch it in first cycle, decode it in the second cycle, execute it in the third cycle, access the memory in the fourth cycle, and write back it in the fifth cycle. Right now, let's roll back to cycle number 2. When I1 moves to the decode stage, we fetch I2, and in the third cycle, I1 moves to the execute stage and I2 will be decoded. At this point, because we know that it's an AND instruction and that the registers that are being used are X12, X2, and X5, we'll realize that there is a dependency between I1 and I2 because both are trying to refer to the same register and I1 is producing it. So at this point, the pipeline hardware should be detecting this dependence and reacting to it. How does it react? Is instead of saying I'll make a progress to the next cycle, means next stage, which is the execute, it will say that it's going to wait until the value of x2 is available to me. How does it do it? In cycle 4, when I1 goes to the memory stage, the pipeline control circuitry will try to re-decode I2. At that point, it will see that the updated value of x2 is still not available in the register file, so it will not proceed with the decode. It's going to try that in fifth cycle. What happens in the fifth cycle? In the first half, we are going to update the register file. In the second half, the register file will be read, specifically the value of x2 will be read, and that's when we are going to make a progress to the next cycle. But what effectively happened is we waited for 2 cycles or we stalled for 2 cycles. This is the simple stalling mechanism. The pipeline hardware will look for data dependence, and until it is the updated value is available in the register file, it's going to stall. It's not going to make progress. Right? We did not progress from in case of I2, we did not progress from fetch to decode stage until the value of x2 is available to us. We are going to basically do the re-decoding of I2 until all the operands are available to us. And further in cycle 6 we are going to move to execute stage. In cycle 7 the memory stage for I2, and then in 8th cycle we are going to write back stage. Now let's see what happens with the other instructions. I3 we cannot fetch in sorry, we fetch it in even if we fetch it in cycle 3, we cannot forward it to the decode stage because decode stage is busy with I2. So you can imagine that the fetch effectively happens in cycle number 5. So again, we lost 2 cycles here, right? And we'll progress to the decode stage for I3 in 6th cycle. And in 7th cycle, we will execute it and so on and so forth. Now let's see what happens with I4. I4 we will not be able to fetch until 6th cycle because the fetch stage is busy with I3. So again, ideally we would have preferred to fetch I4 in 4th cycle. That's what the ideal pipeline would do, but we are fetching it in 6th cycle. So we are delaying it or stalling it by 2 cycles, right? So once we fetch it, only then in the 7th cycle we can fetch I5. So because of the dependence between the instructions, the producer consumer dependence, we are stalling at the hardware and we are carefully checking for the updated value. Only when the updated value is available, we are making a progress to the next stage for the next instruction. So if we look at when these instructions are retiring, retiring is a new term that I've used now. Basically, it means that when are they going to complete, or when their write back stage is going to complete. Here, for example, I1 has retired in 5th cycle. That's what we would say. Or the other way to put it is I1's execution completed in the 5th cycle. Now, if we try to see when I2, I3, I4 will retire, they will retire in 8th, 9th, and 10th cycle. So the two stalls that we introduced at the hardware, right, are eventually reflecting in the performance. We were effectively able to execute 4 instructions for 10 cycles, right? Ideally, it should have taken 8 cycles only. So there is a drop in the performance because of the data dependence that is resulting in data hazards, meaning bubbles in the pipeline. Now let's try to imagine that there is dependence between I2 and I3 also. Let's say I2 is producing X12, right? So instead of X6, let's say that X12 is being consumed by I3. In that case, what happens is there will be 2 additional cycles or 2 additional stalls between I2 and I3 also. Right? For every dependence, producer consumer dependence between 2 consecutive instructions, 2 cycles of stalls are getting introduced. That is very bad for the performance. So the hardware architects started thinking, what can we do better? Yes, stalling is pretty straightforward to understand and implement also, but what can we do to improve the performance? That resulted in a very intuitive idea, which is data forwarding. Let's try to understand that. Here is our dear instruction I1. We'll fetch it in cycle 1, decode it in cycle 2. At the same time, we are going to fetch I2. We are going to make progress with I1 in cycle 3. Basically, it's getting executed. And in cycle 3, we are going to decode I2. That's when we are going to realize that there is a data dependence between I1 and I2. Right? Now, the question the designers asked is the value of X2 available to me? Straightforward answer is no, because X2 will be updated only in the write back stage, which is in cycle 5. But the value of X2 is somewhere already calculated and it's placed in one of the buffers. Basically, X2 is the output of the execute stage, right? So X1 minus X3, which will be already done in execute stage. So that was the idea. So the output of execute stage already has the value of X2. Why can't we use it? Accordingly, they have introduced the data forwarding. What it means is, in cycle 4, when I1 is in the memory stage, basically we are forwarding the value of which is in RZ to RY, right? Because we are not going to access a memory for I1 here. It's a subtraction instruction. But the value of X2 is already available in RZ. So we are going to supply that value to the execute stage, right? The value of X5 will be taken from the decode stage. The value of X2 will be taken from the pipeline buffer, which is between the execute stage and memory stage. If both the values are available, then we can make progress for I2 also. We need not stall. And here the AND operation is performed without stalling. Now let's see how I3 can be handled with data forwarding. We are going to fetch it in cycle 3. In cycle 4, we are going to detect that yes, there is a data dependence between I1 and I3. And the value of X2 is still not updated in the register file. But again, the question comes in, uh, is it already available to us? Yes, it is available as part of RY. So why don't we use it? So in cycle 5, what we are going to do is we are going to use the value of RY to update the register file. Also, we are going to supply the same value or forward the same value from RY to the beginning of the execute stage. What happens there is uh, the value in X6 will be given from by the decode stage, and the value in X2 will be supplied by RY. Hence, in fifth cycle, the execute for I3 can proceed without any stalls. So if we look at I4 also, what happens is we will fetch it in cycle 4, we'll decode it in cycle 5, but by the first half of cycle 5, X2 is already updated by I1. So we are going to reuse that in the second half of the decode of cycle 5, and we can proceed without any stalls further. So I4 also did not stall. Effectively, we have removed all the uh, stalls that we have introduced earlier because of this producer consumer relationship, with the small intuition that the output of execute stage can be reused, right? So with that, we are able to achieve the ideal pipeline speed up also, because all the instructions will be retiring one cycle each, right? Now, with this data forwarding approach, let's try to look at the other data dependence scenarios and see whether they can be solved or not. In the previous scenario, we have introduced two forwarding paths, one from the end of execute stage, basically RZ, to the beginning of execute stage. Another is from the end of memory stage, which is RY, to the beginning of execute stage. Let's look at another example. Here, the value which is loaded in X3 is being used by the I2, basically the store instruction, right? So let's see how the cycle by cycle the operation would go on. In the first cycle, we fetch I1. In the second cycle, we decode it. And in the same cycle, we fetch I2. In the third cycle, I1 will be in the execute stage. Basically, we'll be calculating the effective address, which is 20 plus the value in X15, right? And in the same cycle, we are going to decode I2. At that point, we'll realize that yes, there is a dependency between I1 and I2. We are going to progress with the memory stage for I1, And can we make a progress with the execute stage for I2? Yes, because the in the execute stage for a store instruction, the effective address will be calculated. And are the operands available to us? Yes, because 0 is the immediate value which is there, and there is no dependency for x1. So both 0 and x1 will be the input to the execute stage, and the output will be the address where we need to store the value in x3. But uh, even by the end of fourth instruction, the value of x3 is not available with I2. But again, the intuition is by the end of fourth cycle, we would have contacted the memory, and the memory would have supplied us with the data that needs to be written in x3, because this is a load instruction. So the value of x3 is already available in the register xy. So again, the data forwarding comes into the picture. What happens in the beginning of cycle 5 is the value in ry will be given as input to the memory stage. If we would have stalled, if we would have used stalling, then we would have waited for 2 cycles here, because the decode cannot progress until the register x3 is updated in cycle 5. So we have saved 2 cycles again with the data forwarding, and we achieved the ideal case again. In this process, we have introduced one more forwarding path, which is from the end of memory stage to the beginning of memory stage. So can we claim that with data forwarding, all the possible data dependencies will be eliminated? It means, can data forwarding effectively eliminate all the data hazards? No. We are going to look at an example where even with data forwarding, we will not be able to uh, escape the stalls. Here is an example 5, where we have a load instruction and followed by a subtract instruction. And the value that is being produced by load instruction, which is x3, is being used by the subtract instruction. Let's see how these can be executed in a pipeline fashion. In cycle 1, we fetch I1. In cycle 2, we decode it. In the same time, we fetch I2. In cycle 3, the effective address of load is being calculated. At the same time, we decode I2, and that's when we realize that there is a dependency between x3, I1 and I2, basically x3 register. But we need the value of x3 right at the beginning of cycle 4. But x3 will be available to us only at the end of fourth cycle, because in fourth cycle we are going to contact the memory and get the value that needs to be written in x3. And only by the end of fourth cycle, the value of x3 will be available in ry register, right? So only then we can proceed with the execute stage. So we stall for 1 cycle, and in the 5th cycle, the value in ry will be forwarded to the beginning of execute stage. So effectively, at the beginning of 5th cycle, x1 is supplied by the decode stage and x3 is supplied by ry, so that the subtract operation can be performed. So even with data forwarding, we ended up with 1 cycle stall. Though it will save us in many scenarios, it's not the case that data forwarding will totally eliminate the stalls. It depends on the instructions that we are trying to execute in a pipeline fashion. Okay, so like I mentioned, we have introduced once cycle stall for I2 and all the remaining instructions which follow it. So if you look at the data flow, right, in that we have built earlier, we have the register file, and it would supply us the data for the ALU stage, right? I have introduced the interstage buffers, which are RA and RB here, and the register file has input ports, two output ports, one input port, and the input to the register file will come from ry, and between RZ and RY, we said that there will be one more mux y, and during the fourth cycle or the fourth step for load instruction, the value in RZ will be given to the memory and basically written in MAR that would reply us with data. That would be the other input to mux5. And for store instructions, the value in RB will be forwarded to RM in cycle in step 3 or stage 3. In stage 4, what happens is we are going to forward the value in RZ to MAR and the forward value of RM to MDR so that it can be stored in the memory, right? And to handle the control instructions, we said the mux y will have another input which is return address. And we also understood that the control circuitry or the control uh, path of the this 5-step instruction execution will be generating appropriate control signals for mux b, mux y, and the instruction fetch or stage also, basically the instruction address generator part. Okay, now let's try to introduce the data forwarding paths to this so that we would be able to extend the same path to execute instructions in a pipeline fashion. So accordingly, we are introducing some additional hardware. So we have introduced MUX-Y, and here is the forwarding path from the end of execute stage, basically from RZ to the beginning of execute stage. So the value can be forwarded both uh, in either of the inputs of the ALU based on the dependence, whether it is the first source register or the second source register, right? And we also use it as the input to RM also. I'm going to touch on that in a short while. This is the data forwarding path from end of execute stage to the beginning of execute stage. Similarly, from end of the memory stage to the beginning of execute stage, basically the value of ry can be forwarded either as input 1 to the ALU or input to the ALU, input 2 to the ALU, right? And we might use it as one possible input to RM also. And we have also introduced the third forwarding path, which is from end of the memory stage to the beginning of memory stage. So here it is. So the value of ry is forwarded to another mux, the new mux m. Mux m's input would be either rm or the value of ry. Some more modification, we have another new mux rm, which will be now having inputs from rb or the end of execute stage or end of memory stage, and that would be forwarded to rm as needed. So a quick point now, what happens, how do we handle this data forwarding? Do we forward the data all the time and pick it? No, it should be based on the uh, dependency among the instructions. So accordingly, the control circuitry needs to generate the uh, select signals for mux a, mux rm, mux m also, right? Only then we will know whether we have to go with the value in RB or we have to take the value of RZ or RY, right? The control circuitry will again generate the appropriate select signal based on the dependency among the instructions. So the control circuitry predominantly has two parts. One is hazard detection unit and data forwarding unit. This is the uh, data path that is given in the textbook. So figure 4.54. Whatever we have built so far, just try to imagine that in the horizontal fashion. The hazard detection unit, the data forwarding unit, and additional control lines are needed to implement data forwarding at the hardware. Now you can ask, how do we implement stalling? It's again, the hazard detection would unit would be there, and there will not be any forwarding unit. Instead, we'll have some additional control signals that will say that do not uh, progress. So to implement stalling and forwarding, we need a hazard detection unit, which is basically done during the decode stage, right? It will detect the dependence among the instructions by looking at all the register operands that are uh, needed for the newly fetched instruction, and it will be compared with all the operands of the instructions which are currently under execution, or we will say they are in-flight instructions. And there can be some special cases, like if there is dependency based on register x0, for example, right? X0 is always 0. Should we consider it as a dependence? Because even if some instruction is writing a value to x0 and some other instruction which is following is trying to read the value from x0, it's always 0. So we can ignore such a thing. We will not even classify that as a dependence even though both are using x0. Again, this information is highly dependent on the ISA. Based on the implementation, whether we are going for data forwarding or stalling, the hazard detection unit will determine how many cycles to stall, and uh, from which pipeline register should we forward the value to which other stage. Basically, from should we pick the value from RZ or RY as an input to the execute stage or memory stage, etc. All these signals needs to be generated. First, the we need to determine which register to pick, and accordingly we will be generating the control signals. These control signals will be given to the forwarding unit, the pipeline registers, and all the new muxes that we have introduced to handle the data forwarding. So that concludes the hardware approach on handling the data hazards. What we have seen basically are the straightforward stalling of the pipeline and other intuitive data forwarding approach. The details are in section 4.5, 4.6, and 4.7 of the textbook. I strongly urge all of you to go through it, because the later topics would, I would assume that you have already understood data forwarding. They are built on top of it. Okay. With that, I'll pause this lecture. Thank you.